City College and the birth of the Black Studies movement. Black Studies was the discipline emerging from the 1960s that encouraged women, Latinos, Native Americans, and Asian Americans to push for their own disciplines. Black Studies was literally the vanguard of the multiculturalism that is now taken for granted in the academic mainstream. Black students and intellectuals have engaged in an amazing enterprise, the construction of an entirely new academic discipline. This struggle deserves sustained analysis and dispassionate inquiry. Thus observed Fabio Rojas in From Black Power to Black Studies, how a radical social movement became an academic discipline. The Black Studies movement was ignited in November 1968 at San Francisco State College. Student activists staged massive rallies, clashed with police, shut down the campus, and engaged in lengthy negotiations with administrators, which resulted in the establishment of a Black Studies department the following year. The uprising at San Francisco State sparked demonstrations and takeovers at campuses all across the country. One of the biggest took place at New York's City College of the City University of New York. In the spring of 1969, a decade after Colin Powell graduated from City College, the sprawling campus was in an uproar. Hundreds of students locked the gates, taking control of 17 buildings and holding onto them for weeks. They demanded a sharp increase in Black and Puerto Rican enrollment and that the college establish a Department of Black and Puerto Rican Studies. During a ferocious faculty meeting, at the height of the takeover, one professor hotly demanded, what need was there for anything called Black Studies? One of the very few black professors on campus, Addison Gale, shot back that as long as there was white studies, that is what passed for the standard university curriculum, there would be a pressing need for Black Studies. That was a long, long time ago. Since then, Black Studies has taken root in academia and matured. Has the discipline completed its mission to broaden the scope of the academy? And so now can we expect it to start fading from the scene? Harlem had been Mecca for Black America since the 1920s.
You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out.
50 years after the establishment of the Black and Puerto Rican Studies Department at City College, the nature and thrust of the Black Studies movement has markedly changed. Harlem has become thoroughly gentrified, and a black family has lived in the White House. Is this the end of race? The end of Harlem? The end of Black Studies? Though City College is located in Harlem, in 1969, it would have been hard to tell that from the sea of white faces populating the campus. It began in 1847 as the Free Academy, the first free public college in the country, founded for those denied admission to the established institutions of higher learning for whatever reason, be it religion, ethnicity, or lack of money. In 1969, the City College of New York and the other four-year colleges of what had become the City University of New York were still very much in demand. However, though completely supported by tax dollars, students paid no tuition. The students, not to mention the faculty, hardly reflected the diversity of the nation's largest city. And so the protesters demanded open admissions. That is, a guarantee that every graduate of the New York City public schools be given the opportunity to go to these institutions that the public was paying for. But many were not qualified, cried the powers that be. That's because they attended, through no fault of their own, inferior public schools, countered the protesters. According to Jerome Karabel, in his seminal essay, Open Admissions Towards Meritocracy or Equality, chronicling the reasons for and the ramifications of the fiery demonstrations that swept the City University of New York in 1969, he quotes one of the participants. "To my dying day, I will never participate in anything as important as the events at City College," said Ronald B. McGuire, one of the leaders of a small band of white students who occupied Clapper Hall in sympathy with their Black and Puerto Rican classmates. The events at City College completely changed the entire notion of higher education, said McGuire, not just at CUNY, but in the city, in the state, and in the nation. The City College protests ignited similar uprisings at Queens College, Brooklyn College, Hunter College, and the other CUNY campuses. They proved quite successful, and so many thousands of black and Puerto Rican and working-class white students got a chance at a college education they otherwise would not have. Simultaneously, the colleges across City University also began to open departments and programs of black and Puerto Rican studies. Note how the demand for departments of black studies went hand in hand with calls for more inclusive admissions policies. One of the reasons for many black students' poor performance was that they did not see themselves in the curriculum. Their teachers had scant acquaintance with the history, accomplishments, or cultures of peoples other than white. Few in the society did. Hence the calls for black studies. 15 years before, in 1954, City College's own Drs. Mamie and Kenneth Clark had shown in their legendary doll study that black children, when offered the choice of a black or a white doll, consistently chose the white one. Kenneth Clark was the first black professor in the history of City College. Drs. Mamie and Kenneth Clark's doll study was the key element in the plaintiff's brief in the Supreme Court's 1954 Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas decision ending legalized segregation, which set the stage for the modern civil rights movement, which a decade later morphed into the Black Power movement, the seedbed for the movement to establish black studies.
The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary. The revolution will not be televised.
Michelle Alexander, in her groundbreaking book, The New Jim Crow, notes that African Americans have faced one system of oppression after another. First came slavery, and when that was over, next came the Jim Crow laws of legalized segregation. And when that ended, mass incarceration. Slavery was ended with the brutal Civil War, and afterwards there came Reconstruction. Black and whites working together, blacks serving alongside whites in government positions in the South. All of that came to an end with the rise of the Ku Klux Klan and the institution of legalized segregation in the South. Again, it took a bitter struggle, a civil rights struggle, to 100 years later also end that oppression. And after that, there occurred affirmative action, open admissions, black studies programs. Once again, it looked like we'd reached the promised land. In fact, it was called the Second Reconstruction. But that too ultimately crashed and burned. And now we see gentrification. We see the loss of black political power, the dismissal of black students and their barring from higher education and from corporate America. One thing to keep in mind is that this ongoing struggle to preserve and maintain the black studies movement is not just a battle for African Americans. It's a battle to fulfill the promise of the American nation. And here at City College, it is essential to fulfill the mission of the first free public college, the Free Academy, which eventually became City College. The struggle is long, but victory will be the final result.
You represent more than 150 nationalities. You speak more than 100 different languages. Whoa, just stop there. You represent just about every possible background, every color and culture, every faith and walk of life. And you've taken so many different paths to this moment. Maybe your family has been in the city for generations. Or maybe like my family, they came to this country centuries ago in chains. Maybe they just arrived here recently, determined to give you a better life.